Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So, according to the Hindu tradition, Brahman or the impersonal God, which is also known as existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute, that is Sat, Chit, and Ananda. So, this Brahman or impersonal God is obviously formless. But the God whom we want to worship or whom we would like to worship has a form, has to have a form. Most of the people prefer a form. To worship an impersonal God is extremely difficult. Though he is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, he is present everywhere. We attribute all these qualities to God. That is omniscient, that is, he knows instantaneously because he is the universal mind, the cosmic reality or God as Ishvara as we call him. But at the same time, and he's all powerful. Every Semitic religion also believes in this fact. So, but he is ever free. There are other adjectives which different religions try to attribute to the Lord Ishvara, who is ever free, Nitya Mukta. He is ever perfect. He is not like any other human being, and he is ever pure. No sin or no blemish can taint him. So this personal God, according to Vedanta, has the power to create, preserve, and destroy. Srishti Sthiti Vinashinyai. The Chandi says, Srishti Sthiti and Vinasha. Everything is done by the mother. This power to create, to preserve, and destroy, this power is called as Shakti. It is also known as Mahamaya, the great illusion, the divine mother. So Shiva and Shakti, Purusha and Prakriti, the male and female principle within creation, are inseparable, like the fire and its power to burn. It's not that Brahman is one thing and Shakti is something different. Fire by nature has a power to burn, but that power is inherent in the fire itself. It's not something outside. A power does not come from outside. It is inherent. Sometimes it manifests, sometimes it just burns. So it is just a flame, it gives light. But sometimes when it comes in contact with wood, it burns. So also milk and its whiteness. Milk as a substance has a whiteness. You cannot remove the whiteness from the milk. So all these qualities which we ascribe to Satchidananda Brahman or the absolute formless God who is omnipotent, omnipresent, but still we give him a form, give that Lord a form. So when the personal God, both are necessary. If you see, without Prakriti, Purusha cannot manifest himself. So through his own Prakriti, Atma Maya in Bhagavad Gita says, through my Atma Maya, my own Maya. It's not that Maya is something else. Purusha, just as Sankhyas believe, the Prakriti is independent and Purusha is an independent entity. So they are dualists. But according to Advaita, according to the highest Vedanta, this Prakriti is inherent. It takes the form, when it takes the form of creation, preservation, and destruction, the whole universe, which is nothing but the power of Mahamaya, which was inherent in the inherent in that Brahman itself. Brahman himself becomes Shakti. So Shiva and Shakti in Tantras, the male principle and the female principle, which manifests Avyakta Prakriti, which is also known as Avyakta, which is not manifest. Brahma is Avyakta Brahma. He does not manifest unless through the power of his Maya, Mahamaya, he manifests. So this personal God takes a male form as human being. And he also comes with a feminine counterpart with his Shakti to fulfill his mission. So, this idea of Shiva and Shakti, or Brahman and Maya, Mahamaya, the Divine Mother, or you may say any other Purusha and Prakriti, they often manifest in a gross form as well. So, the male and female principle, when Lord comes in the form of a male, though is born as an avatara with divine qualities, he also comes with his Shakti, the female principle who manifests herself as a feminine power. So, since our very definition of God is that he is beyond all limitations, how can God be limited? Then he will be an ordinary human being like us, it's ordinary jiva like us, which is not possible. So, God cannot be limited, but there are certain qualities which he manifests, you may say, through the power of his Maya. That is what Vedanta believes. But he is not bound by them as are we. Our jivas are bound because we have not yet realized realized our identity with the Supreme Lord or Brahman. So, the God that manifests himself as a human being, according to the concept of avatara, he is beyond all limitations. He is neither a monk nor a householder. Maya cannot bind him. Marriage is just considered to be a bondage for others, but not so for an avatara. Most of the avatars you see who have come have been married. As Sri Rama was married to Sita, Krishna was also married. So some renounced their wives and became monks, like Buddha and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They followed the ancient tradition. Though they were married, they came with their female counterpart, but at the same time, the female counterpart, or the Sahadharmini, that is the word which is used, was played a lesser part. It was a male-dominated avatara in Buddha and Chaitanya. So they had to renounce their wives, who no doubt played an important part as far as they could, but it was always subsidiary or secondary to the main role played by the male avatara. That is what we find. And some avatars or some incarnations, prophets, they never married. For example, Jesus and Shankara and all these great gurus or great saints or great prophets, they never married. So, but Sri Ramakrishna's case, we find he took monastic vows. It's a strange phenomena that though he married, but at the same time he took monastic vows, as did Buddha and Chaitanya. Buddha and Chaitanya, unlike Rama and Krishna, who did not renounce their wives, in the sense they did not become monastics. Whereas Sri Ramakrishna not only married but also took monastic vows. But since his mother was alive, he told Tothapuri, I will take the monastic vows, but I will not wear the external insignia, which is the ochre robes, the girwa cloth. He said, I won't wear because my mother will be shocked. He had a deep reverence for his mother, his biological mother. So he did not want her in old age to trouble her in this old age. So he said, I will take sannyasa in spirit. He in fact took the vows, but he did not wear the girwa cloth, the formal insignia which is associated with the monasticism. He took to monastic vows. Another strange thing he did was, in this incarnation, that he did not renounce his wife. He accepted a woman, which is also a record for the first time a male sadhaka accepted Bhairavi Brahmani, a woman, as his guru. So it has a deep significance, as according to Swami Vivekananda, that accepting a woman as a guru and accepting and worshipping his own wife as a symbol of divine motherhood. So because of this, he came specifically to preach the motherhood of God. So his chosen ideal, if you see his sadhana period, was the Divine Mother. Whether you call it Bhavatarani, Kali, or Durga, he used to call his Divine Mother with various names. We have a variety of names depending on the power that each deity manifests. The Divine Mother comes in various forms. So for him, Divine Mother was his chosen ideal, Ishta, as you see. And his wife not only became his first disciple, but he also worshipped her as he would worship the Divine Mother. So this is something unique which we see in the life of Sri Ma Sharda Devi and also Sri Ramakrishna. So the village of Shihor, we mentioned, which is a few miles away from the birthplace of Sri Ma Sharda Devi, that is, which was Jairam Bhatti. Shihor is the birthplace of Sri Ramakrishna's nephew, that is Hriday Ram, who served him. Hriday served Sri Ramakrishna during his sadhana days when Holy Mother Sharda Devi was not there in Dakshineshwar. She was still in Jairam Bhatti, or maybe Kamarpukur, but she had not yet come to Dakshineshwar. So it was Hriday who served him, looked after all his physical needs, because Sri Ramakrishna would often be in ecstasy in doing his sadhana, that somebody needed to take care of his body, his physical needs. He was in such a high state that he sometimes forgot that he had a body. He did not even eat. So Hriday had to force him to eat something now and then. And uh, he had so much yearning to realize the Divine Mother and perform all the different sadhanas according to different sects of Hinduism and Islam, Christianity, everything. He wanted to experience God. As somebody said, he was a spiritual glutton. Somebody asked him, you have realized realized divinity, you have realized God. Why do you have realized the Divine Mother as consciousness, the first vision that he had? Then why do you try to do? He says, I just want to taste God in different ways. It is like a glutton who likes food, a foodie who wants to eat different dishes. He is not satisfied with one particular dish. He may satisfy his hunger with one dish, but he wants to taste other dishes as well. So Holy Mother often used to say that he used to practice different sadhanas because he just was keen to experience his love for spirituality, his love for realizing God through different paths and different faiths was so much that he wanted to see how the Christians enjoy the worship of the Father in heaven, and what is the message of Jesus, what is the message of Islam, and how people of different religions or different sects within Hinduism, how followers of Vishnu worship him, how Shaktas, how Brahmos worship him. He was very keen to experience truth through these various paths. And after practicing these paths himself, he came to the conclusion that no matter what faith you belong to or what path you choose, ultimately the goal is the same. So, Sri Ramakrishna, Hriday, who served him during his sadhana period, even before Holy Mother came to Dakshineshwar, who belonged to Shihor, and Shihor was the birthplace of Holy Mother Sri Ma Sharda Devi's mother, Shama Sundari, also her biological mother. And that is where the famous Shantinath temple, Shiva temple, where people from both Kamarpukur, Jairambati and neighboring villages, some 20 villages, they used to assemble on Shivratri day to the Shantinath. Shanti means peace, one who is the giver of peace, Shantinath Shiva. In our Hindu tradition, Shiva has many names. Shantinath, Bhutanath. Bhutanath means one who is the Lord of all beings. Shantinath means one who is the Lord of peace. So the Shiva is supposed to is addressed in various ways depending on the temple which is built for him. So this was a Shantinath Shiva temple where pilgrims from neighboring villages, all the villages around Shihor, used to regularly go for puja or worship on some special occasion. Normally, Monday is the day on which Shiva is worshipped. So either on Monday, every Monday, or during some special Shivratri or some other festival, people used to go to Shihor to worship. So when Sri Ramakrishna came to Kamarpukur from Calcutta, he invariably visited Shihor and stayed some days with Hriday. Once a famous, that was his favorite place, and once a famous singer came to Shihor and gave a performance at Hriday's house when Sri Ramakrishna was visiting that place. Shama Sundari was then at her father's home with Sarada, who was 3 years old at that time, a very small, tiny little girl. She was not yet married to Sri Ramakrishna. But Shama Sundari, when Sri Ramakrishna, in his younger days, Sri Ramakrishna was of course much older than Ma Sharda, but when he came, he used to stay in Hriday's house. And Shama Sundari was also staying in that same village, who belonged to that village, but since she was married to she lived in Jairambati where she was born, but now and then she used to go to her father's town, father's village, which was Shihor. So Sharda was just 3 years old at that time. The mother and daughter went to listen to a performance which was going to be organized in Hriday's home. You see, some singers, some baul singers, and some drama party would be invited. They would enact religious dramas as part of the, some celebration. So maybe some celebration was going on in Hriday's house, and there was a performance. And many people, normally when such performances are organized in somebody's house, the nearby neighbors and people from other villages also would be invited. It would usually normally be held throughout the day, and sometimes even food was arranged for all those who attended such performances. So the mother and daughter, that is Sri Ma Sharda, Sarada, who was just 3 years old, and her mother, they also went to listen to this performance. When the performance was over, a village woman, as is the habit there, would teasingly ask the small girls, a 3-year-old girl, what will she know about marriage and all? But they would just make fun and ask, whom will you marry among all the boys who are here? The little girl, the girls they are obviously 3, 4, 5 years old girls, 5-year-old girls. So what would they know about marriage? But somehow, just out of fun, they used to point out to some boy who was going. And with a tiny little finger, the 3-year-old Sarada pointed to Sri Ramakrishna. That is what her mother remembers, that this incident took place because they were all neighbors practically, not very far from each other, a few miles. Though in those days, distances really mattered. A few miles were very difficult. People would not be going to other villages unless there is some special occasion. So they used to meet, they knew each other. But this tiny Sharda just pointed, that was the divine providence that she would be marrying Sri Ramakrishna in the future. Though at that time, there was no such idea. While Sharda was growing up in rural Jairambati, Sri Ramakrishna was, as you know, was practicing intense sadhana in Dakshineshwar. And after having his first vision of the Divine Mother in 1856, you should remember that Sri Ma Sharda Devi, or Sarada, the young girl, was born in 1853. So 3 years after she was born, Sri Ramakrishna, quite independently, was in Dakshineshwar and was having the first vision, had the first vision of the Divine Mother in 1856. So after that, after 1856, his longing for uninterrupted communion with God. He wanted to experience God in various other ways. One vision was not enough. He wanted more and more experiences. So he became completely God intoxicated. He became totally indifferent to food, sleep, clothing, and other necessities of life. He most of this day he spent in days and even nights he used to spend in meditation and prayer. So much was the intensity with which he did his sadhana, and the restlessness or the restless longing he had for God expressed uh, through agonizing cries. He used to cry in lot of agony for the Divine Mother. He just wanted, he was determined to have more and more visions, more and more spiritual experiences. He was not satisfied. So, but at the same time, uh, as he often advised, he shunned the company of worldly people, and he was incapable of functioning like a ordinary person, a ordinary worldly person. He would not do normally gossips and socializing and all those things. So the first possible chance he got after doing his duties, whatever little he would do as part of his worship, he would keep his contact with people to the bare minimum. He was never fond of all those things like an ordinary person. So, because of his God intoxicated state, the first available opportunity to go into solitude, meditation, prayer is to go and not waste his time with as ordinary people would do, like gossiping and as you say, as we often discussed, to mind one's own business is such a difficult proposition for most of us. If we really learn the art of minding our own business or minding our own matters, then we get a lot of time for spirituality. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna used to often say. Now and then, even if you are busy with your day-to-day activities, somehow manage to find a time. If you are determined, then if there is a will, there is a way. One has to find some way out. So Sri Ramakrishna used to uh, he became so indifferent to the worldly contact that very often he could not perform the temple worship. Though he was a priest, after the passing away of his brother, Mathur Babu and others had kindly appointed him as a priest. First, he was an assistant, but when he took the responsibility, naturally he has to follow a routine, but he could not do it. And people thought, because he could not do his normal activities, he was seen to be mentally deranged. They thought, what kind of man he is? Day and night is crying for mother, is doing sadhana, is meditating. Why is he not behaving like ordinary people? So the owners of the temple unfortunately could not understand his ecstatic states, the wonderful spiritual experiences he was going through. They thought it was just a sign of madness. That is what worldly people think. So the owners of the temple thought that this ecstatic state, which results in a strange kind of behavior, is some kind of mental illness, and arranged for him to be treated. They tried, they called different Ayurvedic physicians and other experts. Sometimes they used uh, rather superstitious methods to just see that this kind of behavior changes, it becomes a bit normal. So there is a saying in Bengal, which says, words walk through the ears. I mean, like words travel very fast. Though there was no communication in those days like telephone or even mobile was out of question, but even ordinary telephones were not there. But still, the words, as they say in Bengal, words literally walk through the ear. So from ear to ear, people transmit the facts or the things that were happening. And the news of Sri Ramakrishna's condition, though he was very far off, in those days, Calcutta was very far off. It took 2-3 days for people to reach the village. So it was not every day that people could come. So uh, people spread the news in Kamarpukur and Jairam Bhatti and his brother Rameshwar that Sri Ramakrishna was incapable of doing any formal worship. He is almost gone mad. That is what they thought. and they were very concerned. So in 1858, after his first vision, which took place in 56, in 1858 September, they brought him home. They thought that let him come home, let him relax, let him take some rest, and perhaps he would be okay. Chandramani was his mother, Sri Ramakrishna's mother, was very much distressed to see when she saw her son's indifference to worldly matters. Even in Kamarpukuri, he continued his same sadhana. He was intoxicated with the name of the Lord, used to repeat japa and all those things. So this apparent madness, which all the people of the village thought he was really mad. They could not understand his high spiritual state. So she tried various remedies, including medicines from local Ayurvedic, local doctors. Rites were performed, certain pujas and rituals were performed to propitiate gods, because in villages these things are very common. When somebody behaves in a peculiar way, they attribute some kind of, they are possessed with evil spirits, and charms and incantations are chanted to remove the evil spirit. Most of the times, any abnormal behavior is attributed. The same thing happened in mostly all the countries. They believed in the power of evil spirits to influence man. So they thought there were techniques which some of the uh, people, experts in that field, used to give certain charms or do some incantations to exorcise the evil spirits that they thought had possessed Sri Ramakrishna. However, Chandramani soon realized that her son, that Sri Ramakrishna, was actually normal to a great extent, because when he was not in an ecstatic state, unlike uh, the people who really are mad, their behavior can be assessed. Whereas Chandramani found that when he is not in an ecstatic state, when he is not meditating, he is a very loving, dutiful young son, very polite, very kind. So, so they thought perhaps one of the reasons why once we marry him, that is what most of the people in the world believe. They believe that any kind of bondage will force a person. They don't realize that they are in fact taking away the freedom from one who is born free. To entangle somebody in bondage, a person who is born free, can be very painful. But anyway, Sri Ramakrishna, who could never be bound by the world, accepted this as the Divine Mother's will. He just kept quiet. So they were searching. When she found that he is normal, but he just needs some kind of care, and if he is married to somebody who can take care of him, then I think perhaps he will become normal. But for various reasons, it was so difficult. She and Rameshwar began to search. Rameshwar was Sri Ramakrishna's brother. They started searching for a suitable bride for Sri Ramakrishna. And they knew that it is not so easy, because the news had already spread that he was not mentally normal. And these gossips, they spread very fast. And a lot of people add certain things which are not true, and that complicates matters further. But the mother of Sri Ramakrishna, Chandramani Devi, knew that this is not it is just a kind of divine madness or ecstasy, some kind of divine of spiritual fervor. But during other times, during his normal times, he was perfectly normal, to the extent he was a wonderful gentleman. He used to never hurt anybody, so wise, so practical. Everything was fine with him. So Holy Mother, the mother of Sri Ramakrishna, Chandramani Devi, was searching with Rameshwar, and they were trying to contact various families and ask for their girls to be given in marriage to Sri Ramakrishna. They were searching for a suitable bride. Now, noticing they were growing frustrated and anxious, Sri Ramakrishna was very wise. You see, the divine drama was going on. He knew these people appear to be so restless and anxious on my account. Okay, let me just. This was, after all, a divine play, not only for Sri Ramakrishna but also for Srima Sharda Devi, whom he was going to marry soon. So, just as uh, the divine ordination, according to the divine ordination, that girl in 3 years ago, she had pointed out, just a 3-year-old girl pointing out to Sri Ramakrishna, saying that he would be his the bridegroom. Anyway, Sri Ramakrishna once was worshipping the Divine Mother, and in an ecstatic mood, he said, "Why are you fruitlessly looking for the girl here and there, going to different villages, and why are you so anxious? Just go to Ramchandra Mukherjee's house in Jairambati, and you will find the girl there, tied as it were with a straw." I mean, indicating that she has been already chosen. That is the divine providence. You just go to Ramchandra Mukherjee. That was mentioned by Sri Ramakrishna himself. So he knew of the future Sarada, who would be his, not only his spiritual disciple, but also he would carry on the wonderful tradition of spirituality, of the universal religion, and for more than 34 years after his passing away. That is why she was so young at that time. Though it was not very uncommon to marry young girls at a very young age, and he was quite old because he had not given any thought to marriage. But when they forced him, said, "Okay, if at all you want to marry me, then go. Why you are wasting your time here and there? It is not an ordinary marriage." So someone went to Jairambati. They took his word seriously because Sri Ramakrishna would never utter anything casually. He would either keep quiet, be immersed in his sadhana or his upasana, but now and then he would talk something wonderful. He would make predictions. So when he said go to Ramchandra Mukherjee's house, immediately somebody went to Jairambati and returned with the news that the prospective bride, whom Sri Ramakrishna had pointed out, was just 5 years old. And Sri Ramakrishna was at that time 24 years. So they thought this is not an ideal match. Obviously, there was a tradition when 12-year-old girls would be married to 14 or 15-year-old boys. The age, but here the age difference was too much. But nonetheless, Chandramani Devi said, "It's okay, we will arrange for the marriage." And Ramchandra Mukherjee also surprisingly agreed. And Rameshwar, not only that, he had collected some money for Sri Ramakrishna's marriage. So he paid almost 300 rupees for the marriage expenses and dowry, which was very common. The boys' side normally, in some traditions, the girl side pay, but here, in some cases, even the boys' side also family has to bear the expenses of the marriage. So a date was chosen for the divine wedding in May 1859. So Swami Nikhilananda, in his wonderful book on the Holy Mother, which was one of the first biographies of Holy Mother, he gives a very nice description, because for a Western reader, it looks ridiculous that how can a 24-year-old boy marry a 5-year-old girl. So he is giving the background. So he says, early marriage for a Hindu girl, especially one living in a village, was not very uncommon in those days. But such a marriage was really in the nature of a betrothal. It was just a kind of arrangement that, okay, a formal ceremony would, but actually the bride would live with the bridegroom only after they grew up. It was a kind of arrangement which was made, which could be at a older age be broken. It was the actual marriage took place after the wife attained maturity, when she and her husband lived together. That was the tradition which was followed. But before that, just to make sure that one got the right bride, they would decide long before they attained. It was just a kind of loose arrangement which was made. But anyway, Sri Ramakrishna's marriage was, however, a very strange one. He was a bride in whom the consciousness of sex was not at all awakened, and who remained free from it all through. He, I mean, here was a bride who was not worldly in any sense of the term. She was such a pure girl or a pure child, then she remained free from that earth throughout her life. That is what Nikhilanji writes. So, and the bridegroom also, very strangely, it is a strange marriage. He regarded all women as his own mother and the embodiment of the divine mother of the universe, an attitude which he maintained throughout his life. On one side, she was absolutely pure and who was more or like a nun right from her childhood. And she remained free from any idea of the body or the gross idea of the body, and she was totally free and totally was not one who would be bound. And Sri Ramakrishna, on the other hand, looked upon all women as the manifestations of the Divine Mother. So, at that time, because of his absorption in spiritual practices, Nikhilanji writes that he was oblivious both of his body and the world. And whatever the Divine Mother spoke to him, he would be guided by that. So it was Divine Mother's, he was just praying and suddenly the Divine Mother told him that you ask your parents to go and ask the daughter of Ramchandra Mukherjee, Sarada, to be your wife. With whom, so Sri Ramakrishna had established such an intimate and deep relationship with the Divine Mother herself that it may be presumed, Nakhilanji says, that in this marriage he was guided by the finger of God or maybe the Divine Mother herself. It served no human purpose for either of them, but it served a divine mission, a divine purpose. For if we see, Nikhilanji says, Sarada was destined to continue after Sri Ramakrishna's death his unfinished work of spiritual ministration. Now, this is an important fact that this was a divinely ordained marriage. It had nothing to do with any kind of worldly preparations or worldly arrangements which normally people do. This had nothing. This was a divinely ordained marriage, and Sri Ma Sharda was the chosen one whom Sri Ramakrishna decided to hand over the wonderful idea of motherhood of God or the divine mission of establishing in the world the divine concept of motherhood of God. So this was predestined by the Divine Mother, and that is why Sri Ramakrishna could see in his vision that this was the girl who would come, who first would come as a disciple, but then he would worship her and she would become the mother of all. So on the day of the wedding, if you find now coming to the actual arrangement, this was Nikhilanji's view, and it is true. Swami Shardanandji also, and to a certain extent, Swami Vivekananda also has hinted about it. In fact, he had predicted that it will be Srima Sharda Devi who would be the center around which the true spiritual empowerment of women would take place. And he saw it. Those Swami Vivekananda did not live to see it. He had predicted it. And so also many other direct disciples, they had heard from Sri Ramakrishna himself. Sri Ramakrishna himself telling Sharda Devi that I have done nothing. That is why Mother has brought you, so that you can carry on the divine spiritual mission by showing what true spirituality is, what renunciation is. Holy Mother praised Sri Ramakrishna's natural renunciation, wonderful renunciation of the gross worldly things. But she herself was a great example of that, though she never mentioned that. But for her, it was so natural The idea, the body consciousness was not there at all in Sri Ramakrishna. He was guided by a divine spirit of the spirit of the divine mother, and perhaps that made him tell his mother to convey to the to the Mukherjee family, Ramchandra Mukherjee's family, to arrange for this marriage. And they also surprisingly, though the age difference was so much, they surprisingly agreed without any resistance. Anyway, on the day of the wedding, the village women clothed the handsome bridegroom with a dhoti and chadar. Sri Ramakrishna, as Swami Vivekananda said, he never came to destroy anything. All the traditions, all the customs, like a small child, he accepted. He did not create a big fuss. So with a dhoti and whatever the parents, whatever made his mother happy and the others happy, he naturally, uh, mother and brothers and all the relatives of both the bride and the bridegroom, everything was arranged according to the tradition and the custom. He was decorated with a lot of sandal paste on his forehead, and they placed a wonderful garland round his neck. Shakambhari, Rameshwar's wife, was a little sad. Because of their poverty, they could not afford to hire a musician for the bridegroom's marriage procession. The tradition is that the bridegroom would be taken to the bride's house in Jairambati, and they would do so in a very big procession where they would hire some musicians who would play the drum and all those things and sing songs. So Sri Ramakrishna, that sister-in-law, that is Rameshwar's wife, who was older than him, she felt bad that, see, everybody performs these, the marriage procession is done with so much of joy and festivities, but unfortunately we can't even afford. We were so poor that we can't afford to hire a musician. Sri Ramakrishna said, "Why are you sad? I will play myself." See the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna. He himself made it sound so casual. "Oh, why are you worried? I will play the music." And he imitated. He was very good at imitation. With his own mouth, he created the sounds of the drum, danced, and just imitated the village musicians whom they could not hire. And he created a joyful atmosphere, and everybody started laughing. So he created an atmosphere of joy. Don't be sad. You see, these are the great lessons of life that Sri Ramakrishna taught. We may be poor in spirit, poor in worldly things, but we should not be poor in spirit. He made arrangements. He said, "Why do you unnecessarily be anxious?" That is what happens to people of the world. When they can't keep up with the Joneses, as they say. You see your neighbors doing this and you lose your sleep. Said, if we can't match it, what will be our prestige in life? And that forces people to compete with each other and organize all these festivals in a grander and grander way. Not because you want to do that, but because you want to prove a point to your neighbors. Now, Sri Ramakrishna was absolutely free from these things, and he came to teach that. And he came with a refreshing attitude towards these rituals, these festivities. He said, "Why do you bother your head?" He was telling his sister-in-law, older sister-in-law, Rameshwar's wife. "Why are you sad? All you want is music? See, I can make arrangements for that. I will myself sing." Imagine a bridegroom singing in his own marriage procession, the bridegroom's marriage procession, which is a very important Hindu event. If you see the Hindu marriages, even today they have preserved this tradition that he has to go in nowadays they have replaced, either they have to go on horseback, that was the idea, but now they go on in cars, but in any way, or big vehicles. But the marriage procession, it was just a festivity which was connected with the marriage, where people, the whole villagers and on the way, all the people would know that a great marriage, this person is going to be married. So it was like a public declaration. So these were the customs in those days, which have survived to the present day with a little modification. But anyway, Sri Ramakrishna showed that it is the spirit that is important, not a gross display of wealth and all those things. The joy does not have to depend on the external possessions. Even if you don't have, you can improvise and make yourself happy. It is the inner attitude that makes a person happy, not what he possesses, not what he has got. So Rameshwar also could not afford to hire a palki. So normally at least before his marriage, the bridegroom would be asked to sit in a palki and the people would carry him. It was a festivity. They thought on this day he deserves a special treatment. But Sri Ramakrishna said, just don't worry, I can walk. Why do you need people to carry me? That may be a tradition, but we can break the tradition. I am happy to walk all the 4 miles to Jairam Bhatti. So let us not waste money. Anyway, they didn't have the money to organize all these things. So the traditional wedding ceremony was performed in the old mud cottage of Sri Ma Sharda Devi's family. To satisfy Sharda's parents and to maintain appearances, Chandra borrowed some jewelry. This is another thing. Now, if on these occasions, these are the occasions when the people normally, jewelry would be locked and kept in a safe place. Nobody wore it daily. But at least during these festive occasions, people will be decked and they will display all their jewelry. So, Chandra Devi knew that we have to decorate the bride, Ma Sharda, whom her husband, whom Sri Ramakrishna, her son, is marrying, with some kind of jewelry. Otherwise, what will people think? And it was normally the responsibility of the bridegroom to give these things and arrange. Although she was very poor, Sharda's parents were also poor, but Sri Ramakrishna's parents were poor, so they borrowed. They had very good neighbors, the wealthy Laha family, who was very close. They loved Sri Ramakrishna Gadai very much. So they did not mind. They said, okay, you use this jewelry. They lent, borrowing is not very common. Nobody borrows jewelry. They try to spend their whole life to buy these things. But they borrowed the jewelry, and though Sharda's parents were also poor, they tried their best to conduct the ceremony according to scriptures. So the whole family and many villagers, they had to invite. That's a basic minimum thing. You have to feed, and everything costs money. But somehow they did their best within the limited resources they had. Both the families were absolutely poor. So the priest repeated the mantras, and as was customary, the village women walked around the bride and bridegroom in a circle, holding, they say, according to the Bengali tradition, 27 burning sticks. We do not know what is the significance. Each area or each state has its own way. So a piece of thread dyed with turmeric was tied between the groom's and the bride's wrists to symbolize the bond between the two human beings. It is supposed to be a very sacred bond, not to be broken. Not only in this life, the vow has to be taken where you are supposed to be united in spirit with somebody with whom you promise that you will be spending not only this life, but several lives. So accidentally, when this was being done, a burning stick burned the connecting thread, which was extremely inauspicious. Now, this is for worldly people, it would have meant such a big accident. But Sri Ramakrishna was totally oblivious of all these things. All these rituals he followed just because their family and the tradition demanded it. He never came to destroy any tradition, but he did not give it any importance at all. That is shown, which this extremely inauspicious event, accidentally, the link connecting Sri Ma Sharda Devi with Sri Ramakrishna, the thread which was dyed with the yellow turmeric got burnt. But who can change the will of providence? Undoubtedly, in most cases, marriage is a kind of bondage. But the Divine Mother, as it were, the significance of this burning of that thread, though it was accidental, the biographer says that it is a kind of bondage. Marriage is a kind of bondage for people who are in the people in the world. But this was not to be a worldly marriage. That is why the bond of ignorance. It is a bond of ignorance, obviously, that you are united on the gross plane. But the Divine Mother wanted to convey through this incident that it is not a bondage, it is a spiritual bondage which is nothing to do with worldly bondage. So this was an extraordinary marriage where the bond of ignorance was destroyed even before the marriage vows were complete. So you can understand this divinely ordained. It's not all these incidents do not happen by accident. But a worldly person would be crying and lamenting that how did this accident happen? It is such a inauspicious thing to happen. But Sri Ramakrishna was least bothered because they had no worldly desires, nor had Ma Sharada. So Sharada was a little girl of 5 who had almost no concept of marriage, and Sri Ramakrishna was an illumined soul who had transcended the sense plane. So though it was apparently a kind of marriage, worldly marriage was conducted, even which went wrong in the sense the thread connecting them, making them bound to each other was burnt right from day one. So that was a sign that this was to be a spiritual partnership. A great spiritual partnership, extraordinary spiritual partnership. There would be no gross connection at all. That was symbolized by this burning of the thread, which normally worldly people are so much fond of, because they think it is at the gross level that marriages take place. If that is the feeling, then there is the danger of sorrow when the marriage breaks. For various reasons, nowadays marriages break because it's a gross relationship. But if it is a spiritual relationship where there is absolutely no bondage involved, both were free even before the marriage, they were remained free. Holy Mother, right from beginning, she was totally independent. She showed a rare kind of independence which transcended the sense plane, which could never bind her. How could one bind the Divine Mother of the universe? She had that spirit. So marriage or no marriage, Sri Ramakrishna and Ma Sharada Devi came to demonstrate the independence of the spirit, what freedom really meant, what spiritual freedom really meant. So when you say this is a divine marriage, this is exactly what was demonstrated through this small incident, where the thread of ignorance connecting the two human beings who had incarnated for a higher spiritual purpose to show the uselessness of this gross connection. This connection is just, definitely it is important for a worldly person because it helps facilitate, but its use or its value is limited. It is just at the gross level that this connection is supposed to happen when you marry. But the thing is, the spiritual connection goes far beyond the connection which happens to the body. If that principle is understood, then marriages can be successful. Because if marriages take place, as they say, marriages take place in heaven, in the literal sense, if it happens, then there would not be a sad marriage. There would be mutual respect. There would be a kind of spiritual connection between the two, the bride and the bridegroom, and there would be less and less of the worldly connection. That is what Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Ma Sharada Devi came to demonstrate. So now we will discuss the second part of this, what happened. There are some other very strange incidents which happened in this divine marriage. this marriage, the spiritual consort, you can say, the spiritual bride of Sri Ramakrishna, who played a very important role in showing the real place of a woman, not as a slave to some male, an independent spirit who had equal access or even more access to spirituality than Sri Ramakrishna himself. This was a very significant marriage in the sense that this was to show to the whole world what spiritual kinship really means. It elevated the very institution of marriage to such a high level which worldly people cannot even dream about. That is what the biographer here says, that one cannot conceive of a more sacred marriage where the spiritual kinship was so deep that there was absolutely no physical grossness in this marriage. And even the burning of the thread did not matter or did not mean anything because there was no worldly motive behind this marriage. So maybe other people who were present there, they must have been very sad and they must have went and gossiped, oh, this thread burnt and now what will happen. So people naturally have their own interpretations, but it really did not matter. And then you see the wonderful life Sri Ramakrishna and Srima Sharda Devi after the marriage. You see the entire life and the long life which Srima Sharda Devi lived, 34 years after even Sri Ramakrishna's Mahasamadhi, as if what she was before marriage and what she was after becoming a bride, there was absolutely no change. Each one was spiritually empowered. Each one came to fulfill his or her mission. And this wonderful spiritual marriage was consummated at Jairam Bati, where this divine marriage took place. So we'll discuss in our next class the second part of this divine marriage. So we'll see if there are some questions. So it seems when Purusha manifests to Prakriti internally connected, shows Srishti, Sthiti, Pralay, since all objects, inanimate or not, come from Prakriti, the nature, then why we have to go through the system? Is it reasonable to accept? What system? I don't understand. What system do you mean here? There is no issue at all. The system is what the world as it is, the world as you see it. It requires some explanation. This is what the explanation is given. It is not a question of whether this system, we have no choice. The idea is that when you manifest, when the Purusha manifests itself as Prakriti, the individuals who are part of that system have a choice. You see, that is what the concept Sri Ramakrishna gives of Vidya and Avidya Maya. Nobody asks us. God has retained a will. God has given each one of us a conscience and a will to choose the right type of Shakti, either for freedom or for bondage. If somebody wants to be bound, then it is his sweet will. That is what Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that Prakriti is impartial. The Divine Mother is impartial. If you really want, if a child wants to play, then the mother can't force that child to give up the toys. Let the child play. So there's no question of what system. It's not a system. In a house, there's no system. You have different children. One child prefers to sit quietly and be happy. Another is restless. He creates noise. Two brothers and sisters, if you see in the same house. Now, how do you explain it? What system will you have for them? You can't ask the person who wants to play. He will play. Whether you do it, whether you allow it or not, they will play. But when they are tired of that play, they will go towards Vidya Maya. So Avidya Maya and Vidya Maya, they are manifest at the same time. But God keeps our will free. To that extent, He is free, He can choose. He can choose. We make the wrong choices. Then we cannot blame the system for that. This question was asked so many times that the why did God create this? We are going? It is not God who is telling us. Again and again, the Mahabharata says, I am shouting from the rooftops. The Shastras are shouting to us from the rooftops, don't follow this, don't follow this, don't touch this fire, it will burn you. If we don't listen, why do you blame the Shastras or the system for that? That is what I'm saying. I think that is what your question was. Why this Prakriti system means birth, life. Yeah, what is there? Birth, life, and death. It is not a problem. It was not a problem for Jesus. Jesus did not care when he was crucified. Thakur did not bother when he was dying of cancer. He was immersed in his own self because he has touched the spirit before he died. That is what religion tells us. Our Shastras tells us that don't waste time, follow the path of Vidya Maya, and you will not be bound by this gross thing. So this birth and death is not a pain for those prophets. For people who have realized it is just a play. They say, I was just as I was born, I will grow, and one day I will die. Peacefully they accept this reality. The problem is with those who think that the gross should not go, that I should live, the wealth that I have should be with me. This idea of clinging to the gross is due to ignorance. That is what Sri Ramakrishna and all the scriptures, they appeal to human beings to tell them what is the truth. Now, which path to choose, the system does not decide whether you should go towards ignorance or you go towards knowledge. If you go towards knowledge, you will be free. If you go towards ignorance, you will be bound. As simple as that. So I think I've answered your question. So let us conclude for today, and we will meet tomorrow on our talk on Vedanta and the science of human possibilities. That is our Wednesday talk. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.